So when I had determined that I was going to do this dismount, and you cannot hesitate, I just got up there. I did a few giants. I was about to let go while people were cheering me on, and I hesitated just as I got to the top, and I said, when should I let go, in my head? And a split second later, I let go, but I let go too late. I did a flip in the air, and I landed right on the high bar. And that was not the worst of it. When I bounced off the high bar, I hit the cable, one of the cables in my face, and my teeth went through my face, and they were sticking out on the outside. So the coach had to pull my face and lips all out of and off my teeth. And I remember I swore that if my coach, if he hurt me, that I, a scrawny 130-pound-year-old teenager, I was going to just deck him. And that would have been like decking a young Arnold Schwarzenegger. But he did it right. He didn't hurt me too much. All my teeth on that side were very loose. I know because I was testing them as I was waiting for my dad, and I said, yep, they're all ready to fall out. So I had to wait for my dad, and he finally came and took me to the dentist. I learned an important life lesson. I learned, and I thought I had already known it, that when you've made a decision, go with it. Don't hesitate. And that's a pretty good life principle. When I was attending UCLA, I was a member of Grace Community Church of Los Angeles, and not Los Angeles, but of Grace Community Church of Sun Valley, or you could say Panorama City. I shouldn't even bother with that. But John MacArthur was my pastor at that time. And one night, John was informed that a young man, a member of his church, was committing adultery. Even now, as they spoke, they said that he was in bed with a woman and he was about to make the worst decision of his life. Well, they gave the young man's hotel number to John, and John called, and this man answered in bed and about to commit adultery. And John said, Peter, this is your pastor John. You know I love you. And I know that what you are about to do to commit the sin of adultery will destroy your relationship with God and your relationship with your wife. So stop doing it, get out of your bed, and go home and be with your wife. Well, the young man did as his pastor admonished. Because you see, when it comes to sin, we have to not hesitate. We have to turn away from that sin without hesitation and get our eyes back on the Lord. Look at Romans 14, verse 14. Paul says here, I know and am convinced on the authority of the Lord Jesus that no food in and of itself is wrong to eat. But if someone believes it is wrong, then for that person, it is wrong. If you're watching a TV program and you begin to doubt whether a Christian should be watching it or not because of its content, well, then turn it off. Don't hesitate. Turn it off so that you will not sin against your conscience. Because one person may say, I can watch that. But another Christian may say, I can't do that with a good conscience. That's when you've got to do it, do the right thing right away. It's not easy in your Christian life to be putting off certain practices and replacing them with godly ones. It's not easy. When I was a chaplain in the Union Rescue Mission in Los Angeles, they had what they called a dry-out room. If you were an alcoholic and you really wanted to be serious about giving up drinking, you were not going to gradually drink smaller and smaller glasses of liquor. That was not the way to do it. You have to drastically stop drinking. You do it cold turkey, as they said. And that's what the dry room was all about. An alcoholic who was serious about ending his drinking habit, he would go into that dry room for a week or even more. He was given good food, he was given things to read and so forth, but he had to stay in that dry out room so that the temptation to drink was removed. And by application, this is how you must treat old sinful habits and practices. You have to do it cold turkey. You have to make a radical break from that sinful practice. This is what Jesus taught in Matthew 5:29-30. He says, "So if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for the whole of your body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell." New Living Translation. Putting off old practices and habits alone is not going to make a lasting change. That's just the first step. Let's go on to the next step. Be renewed in your mind. Verse 23. I'll read it as the NIV. "You were taught to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds." Now, this is another very important salvation expression. In a sense, it's the whole key to understanding the principle of putting off the old man and putting on the new man. What makes it so hard to change old habits is our thinking. To change our behavior, we must be renewed in the spirit of our minds, as Romans 12:2 puts it. It says, "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect." Now let's go back to Ephesians 4:22, which explains what ultimately controlled the old self, the old man. And you know what it was? It was deceit. It was specifically the lusts of deceit. For most of our lives, our minds, our thinking, have been continually deceived about heavenly truth. We came to believe in false ideas disguised as truth. What tended to control the things that we did or the way we felt was not the truth, but rather what we believed to be true. This is what is driving so many people today, and explains how the news has become at times a propaganda machine. What it wants to do is for you to believe something that is not necessarily true, but in their perception it is true. We are beginning to realize that if we want to understand the truth, we have to go to other sources, not the normal channels, but other sources for objective truth, and even then, they will not have the whole truth. The old self is characterized by foolish thinking. Luke 12, verses 16-20, has a good example of foolish thinking. It says, "Then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, 'What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops.' And then he said, 'I know. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and then I'll have room enough to store all of my wheat and all my goods. And I'll sit back and I'll say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool. You will die this very night, and then who will get everything that you worked for?' Foolishness is the stubborn belief that we can be fulfilled in life apart from God, the God who made us, the God who sustains our life on a daily basis. The fool says, 'I don't need God. He cannot fulfill me. Only I can fulfill myself.' And so the foolish man looks for fulfillment and meaning in things like his job or his work or his marriage or his riches or all the above. But he will lose all of that, perhaps soon, very soon, perhaps that very night, when he looks at how well off he is. Because temporal riches are just that. They are temporary. And wherever you go after death, your riches cannot follow you. According to Romans 12, verse 2, true transformation comes only when our minds are renewed in the spirit of our minds. It says this in Romans 12:2, the New Living Translation. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, that which is good and pleasing and perfect. You see, at salvation, God begins to renew the mind, which continues throughout the believer's life. This is primarily a work of God whereby he changes us at the very core and center of our inner world, in the spirit of our mind, so that our whole way of thinking is affected. Our understanding is no longer darkened, but enlightened to spiritual truths. Our hearts are no longer hardened, but they become sensitized to spiritual realities and to sin in the believer's life. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 16 says, therefore, we do not lose heart, but though our outer man is decaying, yet our inner man is being renewed day by day. What is the renewing of our minds? Well, God's truth must be a key instrument. The more we learn God's truth, the more we can spot check things that are wrong and foolish beliefs, and then rid ourselves from them. But renewing our minds is not just focused on the negative, on our foolish thinking. Not at all. Even more so, there is positive truth that transforms our way of thinking. Colossians 3:10 in the New Living Translation says, put on your new nature and be renewed as you learn to know your Creator and become like Him. Notice how this verse says that we would be renewed, which implies that God does the renewing. We are renewed. He does it. But the result is that we come to know our Creator and to know Him more and more. Let's go to the final step, put on the new practice. And of course, just putting off old practices and sinful habits can never, in and of themselves, result in true lasting transformation. For real change, for any real change, you must put on a new positive and godly practice. When my dad was in his 60s, he had to have quadruple bypass heart surgery. The surgeon was very honest and said something like this: the goal of my surgery right now is to give you a longer time to live so that you will make the right choices. I cannot cure you, but I can help you. I can give you a better chance, a better life that you will work out in your own way to further not rely on that heart damage. And he told him quite frankly that he must give up smoking or it would kill him. My dad smoked all the time, and he had done so since he was a young man. This was something that he had to put off, and he had to do it immediately. After that meeting with the doctor, he stopped smoking, and he never looked back. It must have been difficult for him, but he never complained. He also stopped eating certain foods that were high in cholesterol that I'm sure he liked. But this was only half of increasing his life and his health. There were positive things that were good things that he needed to do. He also had to put on certain things that he had just never done before and which were really quite positive. My dad had never exercised a lot, but he had to start exercising on a regular basis. And one of the big changes was that my mom and dad actually moved to Austin, Texas, where they built a new house right on top of a golf course. He loved golf, and he knew that if he was near a golf course, that he would get exercise all the time. If we truly want to be transformed in certain areas of our life, we must not only put off the old thing and change the way we think about it, but we must also put on new godly practices. And this is what Paul is going to go on and discuss. For example, and I'll give you these examples that we'll be looking at next time. Ephesians 4:25 says, notice if you see these different steps or this formula. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are members of one body. Chapter 4, verse 28. Anyone who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with his own hands, that he may have something to share with those in need. And finally, chapter 4, verse 29. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building up others according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen.